You will never have a house like your sister is having. My mother Viola laughed, the sound sharp and clinking like broken glass against the crystal flute she held. My father Desmond nodded in agreement, his eyes scanning the room as if looking for someone more important to talk to. Tasha. My younger sister leaned back against the white marble island of her brand new kitchen, a smirk playing on her lips. You are just jealous, aren't you, Nia? She said it with that pitying tone she had perfected since we were teenagers. Admission is the first step to healing, sweetie. I looked at them, my own flesh and blood, standing in a kitchen that cost more than my college tuition, mocking the life I had built with my own two hands. I did not scream. I did not flip the table. I simply smiled a tight, polite smile that did not reach my eyes. Cut to today. I am sitting in my wingback chair, the velvet soft against my fingertips. I lift a cup of tea to my lips. It is bone china, delicate and translucent, the kind that survives for generations if you know how to hold it. Sunlight streams through the floor-to-ceiling windows of my library, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air. My mother was right. I would never have a house like Tasha is having. Because I do not buy liabilities wrapped in stucco and pretend they are assets. I do not build my life on a foundation of debt and delusions. Tasha is. House was a ticking time bomb, and I was the only one who could hear the clock ticking. Before I tell you how the walls came crumbling down around their perfect little lives, I want to know something. Have you ever been the black sheep who was actually the only one telling the truth? Let me know in the comments. And hit subscribe if you want to see exactly what happens when the scapegoat becomes the landlord. Let us go back to where the cracks started showing. It was 6 months ago, the day of Tasha and Braden's grand housewarming party. The invitation was embossed with gold leaf, heavy enough to crack a tile if you dropped it. The dress code was cocktail attire, but the subtext was clear. Come and worship at the altar of Tasha is success. I was driving my Ford F-150. It is a work truck. It has mud on the tires and a slight rattle in the suspension, but the engine is solid and I own it outright. No payments, no interest, just me and the road. As I turned into the subdivision, I felt that familiar knot of anxiety in my stomach. The Azure Hills Estates. The name sounded elegant, but my trained eyes saw through it immediately. I work in restoration. I know the difference between stone and styrofoam. These houses were what we call McMansions. Huge, imposing structures built on tiny lots, slapped together with cheap materials and covered in gray paint to look modern. They were soulless boxes designed to impress people who did not know any better. My phone buzzed on the dashboard. It was my mother. I answered on speaker. Nia, where are you? We are waiting to cut the ribbon. Her voice was high and frantic. I am turning onto the street now, Mom. I will be there in 2 minutes. There was a pause, and then her voice dropped to a harsh whisper. Listen to me. Do not park that monstrosity of a truck in the driveway. Braden has his colleagues from the firm here. We do not need your construction vehicle ruining the aesthetic. Park it down the street, maybe 2 blocks over behind the community center. 2 blocks. It was raining. A cold, miserable Atlanta drizzle that seeped into your bones. Mom, I have the housewarming gift in the back. It is heavy. I am not walking 2 blocks in the rain with a 50-pound box. Nia, do not be difficult. This is your sister's big day. Stop making everything about you. Just drop the gift and move the truck. Or better yet, come in the back door so nobody sees you. The line went dead. I gripped the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned white. This was the dynamic. It had always been the dynamic. Tasha was the princess and I was the toad who needed to stay out of the frame. I pulled up to the house. It was massive, I will give them that. A monstrosity of conflicting architectural styles. Turrets like a castle, columns like a Greek temple, and modern black-framed windows that looked completely out of place. It looked like 3 different architects had an argument, and they all won. I saw Tasha standing in the open doorway welcoming guests. She was wearing a sequined gold gown that trailed on the floor. She looked like an Academy Award statuette. Next to her was Braden, her husband. He is a real estate agent, the kind who wears suits that are too tight and smiles with too many teeth. He had his hand on the small of her back, looking every bit the proud owner of this plastic kingdom. I drove past the driveway, watching the valet park a line of Mercedes and BMWs. I found a spot down the street just like my mother asked. I stepped out into the rain. I was not wearing a gown. I was wearing a tailored black jumpsuit and clean boots. Practical. Sharp. But to my family, if you were not wearing sparkles, you were invisible. I hauled the gift box out of the truck bed. It was wrapped in brown butcher paper and tied with a simple hemp string. No glitter, no bows, just substance. I walked the 2 blocks, the rain plastering my hair to my forehead. By the time I reached the front porch, my boots were muddy and I was shivering. Viola, my mother, spotted me instantly. She did not rush over to offer a towel. She rushed over to block my path to the living room. "Look at you," she hissed, smoothing down her silk blouse. "You look like you just came from a construction site. Could you not have put on a dress, or at least some heels? You are embarrassing us." "Hello to you too, Mom." I wiped my feet on the welcome mat, which was monogrammed with the letter B for Braden. "I am fine, thanks for asking." She rolled her eyes. "Just go put that box in the service pantry and try to blend in. And do not eat all the shrimp cocktail. We have important guests." I walked into the foyer. It was a cavernous space with a double staircase that looked impressive until you noticed the banister was hollow. I could hear the echo of my own footsteps on the laminate flooring that was printed to look like hardwood. A chandelier hung overhead, glittering aggressively. It was huge, probably 5 feet wide. I looked up at the mounting. They had hung a 200-pound fixture on a standard drywall ceiling without reinforcing the joists. I made a mental note not to stand directly under it. Tasha saw me and waved me over. Her friends, a gaggle of women who all looked like carbon copies of each other, turned to stare. "Nia, you made it," Tasha chirped, her voice dripping with artificial sweetness. "Oh no, look at your hair. It is so frizzy. Is it the humidity, or did you just give up today?" Her friends giggled. I tightened my grip on the box. "Happy housewarming, Tasha." I held out the package. "I found this for you. I thought it would be perfect for the garden you said you wanted to start." Tasha looked at the brown paper like it was contaminated waste. She took it with 2 fingers, careful not to let it touch her dress. She ripped the paper open. Inside was a set of hand-forged gardening tools, a solid copper trowel, a cultivator, and a pair of Japanese pruning shears. These were not tools you buy at a hardware store. They were artisan tools meant to last a lifetime. I had spent weeks sourcing them. She pulled out the trowel, holding it up like a dead rat. "It is a shovel," she said flatly. "It is a copper trowel," I explained, trying to keep my voice steady. "Copper enriches the soil. It helps keep away slugs and improves the plant's immune systems. Since you have that big backyard, I thought you might want to plant some hydrangeas like Grandma used to grow." Tasha laughed, dropping the tool back into the box with a loud clang. "Nia, honey, look around you. Do you really think I am going to be out there on my hands and knees digging in the dirt? We are not on the farm anymore. Braden hired a landscape architect. We have people for that." One of her friends leaned in. "Yeah, why would she ruin a manicure playing in the mud? That is so working class." My mother stepped in, taking the box from Tasha. "I will just put this in the garage with the other junk. Maybe the maid can use it to scoop up after the dog." The dismissal was total. My thoughtful gift, my effort, my presence, it was all treated as debris. Something to be swept away so the real show could continue. I stood there, water still dripping from my coat onto their fake wood floor, and I felt something shift inside me. For years I had tried to buy their approval. I had tried to be the daughter they wanted, the sister who fit in. But as I watched my mother march away with my gift, intending to throw it in a pile of garbage, I realized something. They did not hate my gift because it was bad. They hated it because it was real. And in this house of smoke and mirrors, anything real was a threat. I took a glass of champagne from a passing waiter. I did not drink it. I just held it, watching Tasha spin around in her gold dress talking about how much the marble countertops cost. I knew those countertops. They were seconds rejected from the quarry because of hairline fractures. Tasha did not know that. She only knew the price tag. That was the moment the seed was planted. Not a hydrangea seed, but something darker, something stronger. They thought I was the poor relation, the one who failed because I chose to work with my hands restoring old beauty instead of chasing new flash. They had no idea that while they were spending money, they did not have to impress people they did not like. I was building an empire in the shadows. My father walked up to me, then clapping a hand on my shoulder. It felt heavy like a judgment. "Well, Nia," he said, gesturing around the room with his Scotch glass. "What do you think? Pretty spectacular, isn't it? Your sister has done well for herself. Caught a good man. Got the big house. This is the American dream right here." "It is certainly a house, Dad," I said neutrally. He leaned in closer, his breath smelling of expensive liquor and condescension. "You know, if you had listened to me and gone into finance like Braden, maybe you could have had something like this. Instead of playing around with those old dilapidated shacks you like so much. But hey, not everyone is cut out for success. Some people are just meant to be. Support staff. Support staff." The words hung in the air between us. I looked him in the eye. "You are right, Dad. I will never have a house like this." He patted my cheek, a gesture so patronizing it made my skin crawl. "Do not worry, kiddo. We love you anyway, even if you are a bit of a mess." I watched him walk away to join the men who were laughing loudly near the fireplace. A gas fireplace, of course. No real wood, no real warmth, just a switch on a wall. I looked around the room one last time. I memorized every crack in the crown molding that they had painted over. I noted the way the floor dipped slightly in the corner, a sign of a settling foundation that was poured too fast. I saw the water stain on the ceiling that they had tried to hide with a strategically placed recessed light. "Enjoy it while it lasts, Tasha," I whispered into my champagne glass. I finished the drink, set the glass down on a coaster that probably cost $50 and turned to leave. I did not say goodbye. They would not notice I was gone until they needed someone to clean up. But as I walked back out into the rain, back to my truck that was parked 2 blocks away, I was not sad anymore. I was calculating. I opened the door to my truck and climbed in. The smell of old leather and sawdust greeted me. It smelled like home. It smelled like work. It smelled like truth. I pulled out my phone and opened my banking app. I looked at the balance. Then I opened my investment portfolio. The numbers were green. Very green. I started the engine. The rumble was deep and reassuring. I had a meeting the next morning. A meeting about a property that everyone else had given up on. A property that my family would call a dump. But I saw what it could be. And after tonight, I was going to make sure that when I finally unveiled my masterpiece, they would not be able to look away. They wanted a show. I was going to give them a revolution. But first, I had to buy the haunted house on Elm Street. I stand up from my velvet armchair and walk across the room to the floor-to-ceiling mahogany bookshelves that line the far wall. My fingers trace the spines of antique architectural encyclopedias until they stop at a battered coffee-stained manila folder. It looks out of place amongst the leather-bound volumes, but this folder contains the deed to my freedom. I pull it out, the paper crinkling under my touch. This is the document my family laughed at. This is the mistake they said would ruin me. Let me take you back to that night at Tasha's party right after I walked out into the rain. Inside that stucco palace, my father Desmond was holding court in the living room. I can still hear his voice booming over the sound system, bragging to anyone who would listen. He had his arm draped around Braden, my sister's husband, beaming like he had just won the lottery. "Look at this, everyone," Desmond shouted, gesturing to the high ceilings. "My son-in-law is a genius." He snagged this estate for $1.2 million. Can you believe it? A property like this in this market. That is financial wizardry. The guests oohed and awed, clinking their glasses. They saw the price tag as a status symbol. But I stood in the shadow of the hallway before I left, and I did the math. I knew Braden's finances better than he did because I know the market. They did not put 20% down. They did not even put 10. They used an FHA loan with 3.5% down payment on a jumbo mortgage leveraging a variable interest rate that was set to explode in 5 years. They were paying interest only. They did not own that house. The bank owned them. They were renting a lifestyle from a lender who was waiting for the first missed payment to take it all back. My father called it wealth. I called it indentured servitude with a pool. I drove away from their house that night, the windshield wipers of my truck slapping away the rain, feeling a strange sense of clarity. They were playing a game I wanted no part of. I did not want to look rich. I wanted to be free. 2 days later, my phone rang while I was on a job site inspecting a foundation. It was Mr. Henderson, an old contact of mine at the city records office. He was a man who appreciated history as much as I did, and he knew I was looking for something specific. Nia, he said, his voice raspy. That Victorian on Elm Street. The one the neighborhood association has been complaining about for a decade. The bank is finally foreclosing. They want it off their books before the fiscal quarter ends. They are listing it as a teardown. My heart skipped a beat. I knew the house. Everyone in the historic district knew the house. It was the Blackwood Manor, a Gothic revival structure built in the 1920s. It had been abandoned for 15 years. Rumors swirled that it was haunted, that squatters had set fires inside, that the foundation was cracking. To the average eye, it was a nightmare. A rotting carcass of wood and stone sitting on an overgrown lot that looked more like a jungle than a yard. Send me the address, I told him. I am on my way. I pulled up to the property an hour later. It was worse than I remembered. The wrought iron fence was rusted and bent, covered in aggressive ivy that choked the metal bars. The lawn was waist-high with weeds and wild thorns. A massive oak tree had dropped a branch onto the porch roof, crushing the railing. The windows were boarded up with plywood that had been spray-painted with graffiti. Keep out. Danger. Rot. I parked my truck and grabbed my flashlight and a crowbar. I did not see a mess. I saw a challenge. I stepped onto the porch, testing the wood carefully. It creaked, but it held. The air smelled of wet earth and decay. I pried open the front door, the hinges screaming in protest. Inside, it was pitch black. I clicked on my flashlight, the beam cutting through the dust that hung thick in the air. The smell of mold was overpowering. Trash was scattered everywhere. Beer cans, old mattresses, broken glass. It looked like a bomb had gone off. Most people would have turned around and ran. Most people would have agreed with the bank that the only value here was the land. But I am not most people. I walked further in my boots, crunching on the debris. I knelt down in the middle of the foyer and used the edge of my crowbar to scrape away a layer of grime and old shag carpet that had fused to the floor. There it was. Underneath the filth was red oak. Original quarter-sawn red oak with a herringbone pattern in the corners. You cannot buy wood like this anymore. It was old-growth timber, dense and hard as iron. I moved the beam of my light to the fireplace. Someone had painted it white, a crime against architecture, but beneath the chipping paint, I saw the glint of marble. Not just any marble. Italian Carrara marble, hand-carved with intricate floral motifs. I looked up. The ceiling was water-damaged, yes, but the plaster medallions were intact. The crown molding was 12 inches thick. The staircase, though missing a few balusters, swept upward with a grace that modern builders could not replicate if they tried. This house had bones. It had a soul. It was just waiting for someone to stop looking at the dirt and start seeing the diamond. I spent 3 hours in that house. I checked the load-bearing walls. Solid brick. I checked the basement. Dry despite the rain outside. The rumors of structural failure were exaggerated by people who were too lazy to look closer. This was not a teardown. This was a masterpiece in a coma. I called the listing agent right there, standing in the middle of the ruined living room. "I want to make an offer," I said. The agent laughed. "Honey, have you been inside? You need a bulldozer, not a mortgage. We are selling it for land value. 150,000, cash only. No inspections." I did the math in my head. The land alone in this district was worth 200,000. The salvageable materials inside were worth another 50. But restored, this house would be the jewel of the city. It would be worth millions. "I will give you 130,000, I said. Cash. And I can close in 10 days. There was silence on the other end. He knew the bank was desperate. They were bleeding money on taxes and liability insurance for this place. "Meet me at the property," he said. He arrived 40 minutes later in a pristine Lexus, looking terrified to step out of his car. He looked at my muddy boots and my construction vest with disdain. He did not think I had the money. He thought I was wasting his time. I opened the glove box of my truck and pulled out a proof of funds letter from my bank. I had been saving every penny I made from my restoration projects for 7 years. I lived in a studio apartment. I drove an old truck. I ate sandwiches for lunch. While Tasha was buying designer bags and Braden was leasing luxury cars, I was stacking cash for this exact moment. The agent looked at the paper, then at me. His eyes widened. "Are you sure about this?" he asked, looking at the rotting house. "This place is a money pit. You are going to bury yourself." I took the purchase agreement he handed me. I did not even have a desk to write on. I slammed the clipboard down on the hood of my F-150. The rain was starting to drizzle again, leaving droplets on the paper. I uncapped my pen. "I am not burying myself," I told him, signing my name with a flourish. "I am digging for gold." I handed the papers back to him. The deal was done. I owned the scariest house on the block. I owned the graffiti. I owned the rats. I owned the broken windows. But I also owned the history. I drove home that night with a grin so wide my face hurt. My family thought I was the failure. They thought I was the one who needed saving. But as I merged onto the highway leaving the Azure Hills and their fake mansions far behind, I knew something they didn't. I had just bought an empire for the price of a used luxury car. And when I was done with it, they wouldn't be laughing. They would be weeping. But the hard work was just beginning. The demolition phase was brutal, and it was about to reveal secrets that neither I nor the previous owners knew existed. Secrets that would change the value of the property overnight. I slide the heavy French doors open and step out onto the terrace. The stone is cool beneath my bare feet, and the morning sun washes over the garden below. From here, you can see the weeping willows trailing their fingers in the koi pond, and the limestone walking paths that wind through beds of white roses. It is peaceful now, silent. But whenever I stand here looking out at the beauty I resurrected from the dirt, I can still hear the phantom echoes of my mother's sobbing from that first Sunday afternoon visit. The news that I had purchased the Blackwood Manor traveled through the family grapevine faster than a viral scandal. I had not even told them. I suspect my cousin, who works at the county clerk's office, saw the deed transfer and called my mother before the ink was dry. Viola called me on a Tuesday, her voice tight with a mixture of curiosity and dread. "Nia, we heard you bought a property in the historic district. We are coming to see it on Sunday. Do not say no. We need to see what you have done with your savings." It was not a request. It was an inspection. Sunday arrived with a humid, oppressive heat. I was already at the house wearing a respirator mask and heavy gloves, tearing down rot-infested drywall in the parlor. I heard the crunch of gravel outside and looked through the cracked window. It was a convoy. Tasha's white Porsche Cayenne led the way, followed by my father's pristine Lincoln Navigator. They looked like sleek spaceships landing on a desolate alien planet. I walked out to the porch to meet them, wiping plaster dust from my forehead. I had not showered. I looked like the house, rough, unfinished, and unapologetic. Tasha stepped out of her car first. She was wearing white linen pants and open-toed wedges. She took one look at the house, at the ivy choking the chimney, the missing shingles on the roof, and the boarded-up windows, and she froze. Then a sound erupted from her throat that was halfway between a laugh and a gag. "Oh my God!" she shrieked, covering her mouth with a manicured hand. "Nia, please tell me this is a joke. Please tell me you are renting this for a Halloween party. This looks like the set of a low-budget horror movie where the babysitter dies first." She gingerly stepped onto the grass, avoiding the dandelions as if they were landmines. My parents were slower to emerge. When my mother Viola finally stepped out, she looked as if she had just witnessed a car accident. She stared up at the peeling paint on the siding, which was shedding like dead skin, revealing the gray, weathered wood underneath. Her eyes welled up with tears. Real tears. "Nia." Her voice trembled. "Why? Why would you do this to yourself? Why would you do this to us?" I walked down the steps. "I am not doing anything to you, Mom. I bought a house. It is an investment. An investment," she shouted, her voice cracking. "This is not an investment. This is a ruin. Look at this place. It smells like mildew and bad decisions. We have neighbors, Nia. People know who we are. What am I supposed to tell the church group? That my daughter is living in a crack den." My father Desmond slammed his car door shut. He didn't look sad. He looked angry. He marched up the walkway, kicking a loose brick aside with his dress shoe. He stood before me, hands on his hips, radiating disappointment. "Your sister just bought an estate in Azure Hills," he said, pointing a finger at my chest. "A turnkey property. Brand new appliances, warranty on the roof. And you take your inheritance from your grandmother and you throw it into a pit." "Come inside," I said, keeping my voice level. "You should see the potential." I led them through the front door. The foyer was dim lit only by the sunlight streaming through the gaps in the plywood. The air was thick with dust and the smell of old timber. As we walked in, Tasha let out a dramatic cough, waving her hand in front of her face. "It smells like dead rats and poverty in here," she muttered. Braden, Tasha's husband, had been quiet until now. He walked in with the swagger of a man who thinks he owns the room, even when the roof is leaking. He was wearing his signature navy blazer and checking the walls with a critical, squinty-eyed expression. He fancied himself a real estate mogul because he sold cookie-cutter condos to first-time buyers. He walked over to the main staircase, grabbed the banister, and gave it a hard shake. It wobbled slightly. "Structural instability," Braden announced loudly, his voice echoing in the empty hall. He turned to my father. "Desmond, look at this. The load-bearing beams are likely compromised. I can feel the floor dipping under my feet." He walked over to me, shaking his head with a pitying smile. "Nia, look. I know you like arts and crafts projects, but this is real estate. This is the big leagues. You got scammed. Whoever sold you this lemon saw you coming a mile away." He stomped his foot on the floor. "Hear that hollow sound? That is dry rot. Or termites. Probably both. To fix this foundation alone, you are looking at $40,000, maybe $50,000. And that is before you even touch the plumbing or the electrical. You paid, what, $130 for this?" He laughed, a short, barking sound. "You will be underwater by Christmas. The cost of repairs will exceed the market value by double. You have negative equity written all over this." I stood there watching him pontificate. I watched Tasha take a selfie with a piece of peeling wallpaper, captioning it probably something like, "So grateful for my blessings." I watched my mother refuse to touch anything, clutching her purse to her chest, like she was afraid the house would try to steal it. They saw a disaster. They saw a money pit. They saw shame. But I looked down at where Braden was stomping his foot. He was standing on a layer of filthy, matted brown shag carpet from the 1970s. It was disgusting. It smelled of wet dog and decades of neglect. But underneath that carpet, I knew exactly what was waiting. Before I bought the place, I had snuck in and lifted a corner in the closet. Beneath the filth lay pristine quarter-sawn white oak flooring with an inlaid walnut border. It was a lost art. To replicate that floor today would cost $60 a square foot. In this hallway alone, there was $15,000 worth of hardwood just waiting to be sanded and sealed. The hollow sound Braden heard was not wrought. It was the original subflooring built on 16-inch centers with old-growth pine creating a natural acoustic resonance that modern concrete slabs could never achieve. And the structural instability of the staircase. It was a loose newel post. I could fix it with a $10 lag bolt and some wood glue in 20 minutes. I looked at Braden, realizing that for all his talk of markets and margins, he did not know the first thing about value. He only knew price. "I understand your concerns," I said quietly. Mom turned to me, wiping her eyes. "Nia, just sell it. Take the loss. Call the bank tomorrow and beg them to take it back. Maybe Braden can help you list it as a distressed asset. We can lend you some money to rent a nice apartment in the city. Something clean. Something normal." "Yeah," Tasha chimed in. "Listen to Mom. You are clearly in over your head. I mean, look at you. You have dust in your hair. You look exhausted. It is pathetic, honestly. Why do you always have to be so difficult? Why can't you just be normal like us?" I looked at them. Really looked at them. My sister drowning in debt to keep up appearances. My brother-in-law a fraud in a cheap suit. My parents terrified of what the neighbors might think. They were standing in the middle of a gold mine crying because it wasn't shiny enough yet. "I am keeping the house," I said, "and I am not asking for your help. In fact, I am not asking for your permission." My father turned purple. "Fine," he spat the word out. "Be stubborn. Ruin your credit. Ruin your life. But do not come crying to us when the roof caves in on you. Do not ask us for a dime when you are freezing in the winter because you can't afford a furnace. You are on your own, Nia, completely on your own." "That is exactly how I like it," I replied. "Get in the car, Viola," my father barked. "We are leaving. I can't breathe in this dust trap." They filed out, shaking the dirt off their shoes as they stepped onto the porch, as if leaving the house was a physical cleansing. Tasha looked back one last time, smirking. "Good luck with your haunted house, sis. Maybe the ghosts will pay the mortgage." I watched them drive away, their taillights disappearing down the overgrown driveway. Silence descended on the house again. I was alone. No, I was not alone. I was with my asset. I walked back inside and knelt down where Braden had stomped his foot. I took my utility knife from my belt and sliced a long strip of the shag carpet. I ripped it back with a satisfying tearing sound. The afternoon sun beamed through the plywood slats hitting the floor. The oak beneath glowed rich and honey-colored, untouched by time. It was perfect. I ran my hand over the wood. "Let them laugh," I whispered to the empty room. "Let them cry about their reputation. They see a ruin. I see a retirement fund." I stood up and picked up my sledgehammer. The wall separating the kitchen from the dining room was non-load bearing, despite what Braden thought. I swung the hammer with all my might, the plaster shattered, dust exploding into the air like fireworks. It was time to get to work. The dump was about to become a legend. And the best part was they wouldn't see it coming until I invited them to tea. But first I had a lot of secrets to uncover. And the basement held something far more valuable than just a furnace. Something that would rewrite the history of this entire neighborhood. The camera is positioned low, looking up at me as I lean against the newly restored oak railing of the grand staircase. I am not wearing the velvet dress anymore. In my memory, I am wearing denim coveralls covered in white plaster dust, my hair tied back in a messy bun, holding a sledgehammer like it is a royal scepter. Because for 6 months, that is exactly what I was. A queen building her kingdom out of rubble. While my family was busy whispering about my mental health at their country club dinners, I was living in a construction zone. I did not have a social life. I did not have weekends. My Friday nights were spent scraping 50 years of nicotine stains off the crown molding. My Sunday mornings were spent negotiating with plumbers and electricians who tried to overcharge me because they saw a woman alone in a big house. They learned very quickly that I know the price of copper piping down to the cent. There is a specific kind of tired you feel when you are restoring a home with your own hands. It is a deep, bone-weary exhaustion, but it is also the most satisfying feeling in the world. Every swing of the hammer was a statement. Every layer of wrought I peeled away was like peeling away the labels my family had put on me. Failure. Weird. Broken. One afternoon in July, the heat was suffocating. I was working in the main parlor. The previous owners, in a fit of bad taste during the 80s, had covered the entire east wall with cheap faux wood paneling. It was hideous. I grabbed my crowbar. I jammed it behind the paneling and pulled. The wood screamed as the nails gave way. I ripped a large section down, expecting to find crumbling plaster or maybe a rat's nest. Instead, a beam of sunlight hit something green. I stopped. I pulled down another section faster this time. My heart started pounding in my chest. Hidden behind that cheap plywood was a fireplace, but not just any fireplace. It was an original 1920s Art Deco masterpiece tiled with emerald green ceramic that shimmered like jewelry. The mantel was hand-carved mahogany, untouched by time, preserved perfectly in the darkness for decades. I ran my gloved hand over the cool tiles. It was beautiful. It was art. And it was worth more than Tasha's entire living room set. That was the moment I knew I was winning. But the house was not done revealing its secrets. The real jackpot was waiting for me in the basement. 2 weeks later, I was downstairs checking the foundation. The basement was a labyrinth of stone walls and shadows. In the far corner, behind a rotting wooden shelf that held rusted paint cans, I noticed the airflow was different. The flame of my lighter flickered toward the wall. There was a draft coming from solid stone. That was impossible. I pushed on the shelf. It groaned, then swung inward on hidden iron hinges. My breath caught in my throat. I stepped through the opening into a small windowless room. The air inside was stale, preserved from another era. A single light bulb hung from the ceiling. I screwed in a fresh bulb I had in my pocket and pulled the chain. It was a speakeasy, a hidden room from the Prohibition era. There were empty crates stamped with dates from 1924. There was a small bar built into the corner, but on the dusty table in the center of the room sat a metal lockbox. I did not need a key. The lock had rusted through. I pried it open. Inside were not gold bars or cash. It was something better. Paper, letters, deeds, and journals. I sat on the dusty floor and read for hours. The letters were signed by Dr. Marcus Thorne. I knew that name. Every black child in this city learned about Dr. Thorne during History Month. He was the first African-American surgeon in the state. He built a hospital for colored people when the city refused to treat them. This was his house. This was not just a Victorian ruin. This was a historical landmark. Dr. Thorne had treated patients in this very basement when it was too dangerous to go to the hospital. He had held secret meetings here with civil rights leaders. I realized I was holding a winning lottery ticket. I called my contact at the State Historic Preservation Office the next morning. When the inspector came out, he actually cried. He confirmed everything. "Do you know what this means, Nia?" He asked me, shaking my hand vigorously. I knew exactly what it meant. It meant the property was immediately eligible for the National Register of Historic Places. It meant I qualified for a 10-year property tax freeze. It meant I was eligible for federal and state grants that would cover 40% of my renovation costs. The government was literally going to pay me to finish my dream house. The value of the property tripled overnight. It went from a scary old house to a priceless piece of American history. I was sitting on millions of dollars of equity, and I had not even finished painting the exterior. I celebrated with a glass of cheap wine on my porch, scrolling through my phone. That is when I saw Tasha's latest post on Instagram. She was in Cabo. Again. The photo showed her holding a glass of champagne wearing a bikini that cost more than my work truck. The caption read, "Living my best life. Blessed. Manifesting abundance." I swiped left, a photo of her new Louis Vuitton luggage. Swiped left again. A video of Braden popping bottles at a club. To the outside world, they were rolling in money. But I knew the truth. I have a friend who works in underwriting at the bank where Braden holds his accounts. Small towns talk and big cities talk even louder if you know the right people. Tasha and Braden were drowning. They were playing a dangerous game called credit card roulette. They were using one card to pay off the minimum balance of another. They had taken out a home equity line of credit on their house just to pay for this vacation. They were maxed out. Every single card was at its limit. I looked at the photo of Tasha's smiling face, so smug, so confident. She had no idea that the ground beneath her was crumbling. She was posting about abundance while I was sitting on a literal gold mine of history. She was buying depreciation. I was buying legacy. I put my phone down. Let her enjoy the sun. Let her enjoy the champagne. Because winter was coming. And when the financial storm hit, she would have nowhere to hide. I went back to work. I had a speakeasy to restore. And I had a plan to make sure that when my family finally saw this place, they would understand exactly who the failure really was. The best part was that the house itself was about to help me set the trap. The cracks in Tasha's life were getting bigger, and soon she would come knocking on my door, desperate for a savior. She just didn't expect the savior to be the sister she called a charity case. I walk back to the crushed velvet sofa in the center of my living room. The fire I lit earlier is crackling softly, casting long dancing shadows against the high ceilings. I reach for the decanter on the side table and pour myself a glass of deep red Cabernet. The liquid swirls in the glass, heavy and rich. It tastes like patience. It tastes like victory. Outside, the autumn wind is howling against the stone walls of my house. But inside, it is silent. My home was built 90 years ago by craftsmen who understood that a house is supposed to be a fortress. The slate roof is thick. The windows are sealed tight. I am safe. My sister Tasha, however, was learning a very hard lesson about modern construction. November in Atlanta brought the rains. Not a gentle drizzle, but weeks of relentless driving storms. For a house like mine, built on high ground with proper drainage and solid masonry, the rain was just ambiance. For a house like Tasha is built in a rush on a low-lying lot with cheap stucco and even cheaper labor, the rain was an invasion. It started with a text message from my mother in the family group chat, just a vague prayer emoji and a message saying, "Pray for Tasha." I did not pray. I checked the weather radar. The problem with McMansions like the one Braden bought is that they are built for curb appeal, not for climate. They had focused so much on the grand two-story foyer and the marble waterfall island that they had ignored the boring stuff. Like flashing around the chimney, like grading the soil away from the foundation, like installing a sump pump that actually worked. When the ground became saturated, the water had nowhere to go. So it went where water always goes. The path of least resistance. I heard the details later from a mutual acquaintance who works for the restoration company Tasha had to call. Apparently, the roof began to leak directly over their master bedroom. Not a drip, but a steady stream of brown, dirty water soaking into their custom silk headboard. But that was just the beginning. Because the builder had not graded the lot correctly, the rainwater pooled against the foundation. The pressure built up until it found a crack in the poured concrete basement walls. Tasha's finished basement, the one with the home theater, and the wet bar that she bragged about constantly turned into an indoor swimming pool. 3 inches of muddy water destroyed the carpet, the drywall, and the expensive leather recliners Braden had bought on credit. It was a disaster, but disasters cost money to fix, and that was the one thing they were running out of. The economy operates in cycles. I study these cycles. Braden, unfortunately, just rode them. The real estate market had been hot for years, and mediocre agents like Braden had made easy money just by showing up. But when the Federal Reserve hiked interest rates to combat inflation, the market froze. Buyers disappeared. Listings sat on the market for months. Commissions dried up. Braden's firm, a high-pressure sales agency that relied on volume, started cutting the dead weight. Braden, with his high salary draw and low closing numbers, was the first to go. He lost his job on a Tuesday morning. By Tuesday afternoon, the reality of their leverage hit them. They had a $4,000 mortgage, 2 leased luxury cars, and 5 maxed-out credit cards. And now they had a hole in their roof and a flooded basement. I was expecting the call. I just didn't expect Tasha to play the role she chose. My phone buzzed on the coffee table on Thursday evening. The screen lit up with a photo of Tasha, heavily filtered, smiling perfectly. I let it ring twice before picking up. I took a slow sip of wine. "Hello, Tasha," I said, keeping my voice neutral. "Hey, big sis." Her voice was high, breathless, and dripping with a synthetic sweetness that made my teeth ache. "How are you? We have not talked in ages. I was just thinking about you." "You were thinking about me," I repeated. "Or were you thinking about my bank account?" She laughed, a nervous, brittle sound. "You are so funny, Nia. Always joking." "No, really, I miss you. Mom says you are still working on that old house. How is that going? It must be so dusty." "It is going well, Tasha," I said, cutting through the small talk. "Why are you calling?" There was a pause. I could hear her breathing on the other line. I could hear the stress behind the silence. "Well, honestly, Nia, we are having a little bit of a rough week. You know how these storms have been. We had a tiny leak in the roof. Nothing major, just a little water. But the insurance company is being a nightmare, dragging their feet on the claim. And Braden... Well, Braden is moving firms right now. He got a better offer, so he is in between checks for a few weeks." She was lying. He didn't get a better offer. He got a pink slip. So... She continued, rushing her words now. "We are just in a temporary liquidity crunch. Cash flow issues, you know how it is with investments. I was wondering if you could float us a loan. Just a small bridge loan. $5,000. Just to get the roof fixed before the next storm hits. We will pay you back as soon as Braden's bonus clears next month." $5,000. She asked for it like she was asking for a cup of sugar. I swirled the wine in my glass. "Let me get this straight. You want me to lend you $5,000 because your brand new $1 million house is leaking and your husband is temporarily embarrassed. Millionaire status is on hold. Nia, do not be like that. It is for family. We are family. You know I would do it for you." I almost laughed. "No, Tasha, you wouldn't. When I needed a ride from the hospital last year, you said you were too busy getting a spray tan. When I needed help moving into my apartment, you said manual labor wasn't your vibe." I leaned back against the sofa cushions. "I am confused, Tasha. I see your Instagram. I see the trips to Cabo. I see the new G-Wagon in the driveway. I see the closet full of designer bags." "So?" She snapped, the sweetness starting to crack. "So," I said calmly, "if you need $5,000, why don't you sell something? You have a closet full of assets, right? That orange Hermes Birkin bag you posted last week. The caption said it was an investment piece. Sell it. That bag is worth 10 grand on the resale market. That fixes your roof and dries out your basement." Silence. Heavy, suffocating silence. Then the explosion. "Are you insane?" she screamed. Her voice was not sweet anymore. It was the voice of the girl who used to pinch me when our parents weren't looking. "You want me to sell my Birkin? That is my status, Nia. People look at that bag and they know who I am. I cannot sell my things. I am not a pawnbroker." "Then you are not desperate enough," I said, cold and sharp. "You are asking me for money that I earned with sweat and dust while you refuse to part with a purse. That is not a crisis, Tasha. That is vanity. You are just jealous," she shrieked. "You have always been jealous. You are a bitter, lonely, miserable witch living in a haunted house with no husband and no life. You want me to fail. You want to see me suffer because you can't stand that I am the one who made it. I am the one Mom and Dad are proud of. Not you, never you." I listened to her rant. Her words used to hurt me. They used to make me cry in my bedroom. Now they just sounded like desperation. "Are you done?" I asked. "Go to hell, Nia. Keep your dirty money. I hope your house burns down." She hung up. I looked at the phone screen. A moment later, the notification popped up. "Tasha has blocked you on Instagram. Tasha has blocked you on iMessage. I set the phone down on the polished oak table. I took another sip of my wine. It tasted even better now. She called me a witch. She called me miserable. But she didn't call me broke, and she certainly didn't call me wet. I looked up at my ceiling. Not a single water stain. Dry, solid, paid for. She thought blocking me was a punishment. She didn't realize she had just done me a favor. She had cut the last cord of guilt. She had made it clear that we were not sisters anymore. We were financial adversaries. And the irony was, she was going to need a lot more than $5,000. I knew the contractors she had hired. I knew the corners they cut. That leak in the roof was just the first domino. The mold was coming next. And after the mold, the foreclosure notice. I finished my wine and stood up. I had a busy week ahead. I had a meeting with my preservation architect to finalize the plans for the ballroom restoration. And I needed to make a call to a friend of mine who specialized in buying distressed mortgage debt. Tasha wanted to play the high-status game. Fine. I was about to buy the board she was playing on. The storm outside raged on, battering the windows, but inside, the legacy estate. Everything was warm, golden, and completely under my control. The cracks in their facade had turned into canyons, and I was just sitting back watching the landslide begin. The camera pushes in slowly on my face. I am not blinking. I am not smiling. My expression is as cold and still as the surface of a frozen lake. If you look closely at my eyes, you can see the reflection of a family that has completely lost its mind. Thanksgiving at my parents' house was never about gratitude. It was about performance art. And this year, the theme of the play was The Martyrdom of Tasha. I arrived precisely at 4 o'clock. I wore a simple cashmere sweater and wool trousers. Understated. Expensive if you knew fabric, but quiet. Tasha, on the other hand, was dressed for a funeral. She was wearing all black, no jewelry, and very little makeup. It was a costume. She was playing the role of the destitute victim, a woman beaten down by the cruel, unforgiving world. We sat around the mahogany dining table. The spread was lavish. Roast turkey, candied yams, mac and cheese, collard greens, enough food to feed an army. Yet the conversation was starving for truth. For the first 20 minutes, the only sound was the clinking of silverware and Tasha's theatrical sighing. She pushed a piece of cornbread around her plate like it was a burden. "I just cannot eat," Tasha whispered loud enough for the neighbors to hear. "My stomach is in knots. I am just so worried about the future." My mother Viola immediately rushed to comfort her. "Oh, sweetie, you have to keep your strength up. You are under so much stress. It is not your fault the economy is crashing." I took a bite of turkey. The economy was not crashing. The S&P 500 was up 12% that quarter. Unemployment was at a record low. But in this dining room, facts were treated like unwanted guests. Braden sat next to Tasha, looking like a man who was trying to shrink into his suit. He cleared his throat. "It is the market correction," he said, using buzzwords he probably read on a Twitter thread. "The interest rates have paralyzed the sector. My firm had to make cuts. It is a bloodbath out there. High-end real estate is dead. We are just victims of the cycle." I chewed slowly. High-end real estate was not dead. I had closed on 2 commercial properties that month. People were buying. They just weren't buying from Braden because Braden was lazy. My father, Desmond, slammed his hand on the table. It made the crystal wine glasses jump. "It is a disgrace," Desmond announced. "A man works hard, does everything right, and the system chews him up. Braden's son, do not let it get you down. You are a shark. You will bounce back. But until then, we need to talk about solutions." I felt the air in the room shift. The target had been painted, and the laser was pointing directly at me. Desmond turned to me. His eyes were hard. "Nia, we need to discuss the family finances." I wiped my mouth with a linen napkin. "I did not know we had family finances, Dad. I thought we all had separate bank accounts." "Don't get smart with me," he snapped. "Your sister is in a crisis. They are looking at a balloon payment on their mortgage next month. $5,000. plus the insurance deductible for the roof. They need $8,000 by the first of the month. I took a sip of water. That sounds stressful, I said calmly. I hope they have an emergency fund. Tasha let out a sob. It was a loud, ugly sound. An emergency fund. Nia, are you serious? We invested everything into the house. That house is our asset. We were building generational wealth. How can you be so cold? Viola chimed in, her voice shrill. Nia, look at your sister. She is suffering. And here you are sitting on that inheritance from grandma plus whatever money you make from flipping those old shacks. You have plenty. I placed my glass down. I do not flip shacks, mother. I restore historical landmarks. And my money is tied up in restoration costs. Desmond leaned forward. This is not a request, Nia. This is an obligation. You are single. You do not have a husband to support. You do not have children to worry about. You have no real responsibilities. You are just playing house in that ruin of yours. The audacity took my breath away. Because I was single, my money was considered public property. Because I did not have a husband, my labor was viewed as less valuable. You want me to pay their mortgage? I clarified. I want you to help your family. Desmond corrected, his voice booming. I want you to write a check for $8,000. Call it a loan if you want, but you will do it. You cannot let your sister lose her home while you sit on cash. It is selfish. It is immoral. I looked at Tasha. She wasn't crying anymore. She was watching me, waiting for me to break. She expected me to do what I always did. Cave, apologize, pay the tax for being the unloved daughter. But I was not that daughter anymore. I stood up. Where are you going? Viola demanded. To the restroom, I said. And then I am going home. Sit down, Desmond roared. We are not done discussing this. We are done. I said, my voice quiet but sharp as a razor. I will not be writing a check. Not for $8,000. Not for $8. If Tasha needs money, she can sell the Range Rover, or the jewelry, or the designer furniture. I am not subsidizing a lifestyle I was not invited to enjoy. I turned and walked out of the dining room before they could respond. I could hear my father shouting behind me, calling me ungrateful, calling me a traitor. I walked down the long hallway toward the powder room. My heart was pounding, not from fear, but from adrenaline. I had finally said no. As I passed the heavy oak door of my father's study, I heard a voice. It was hushed, frantic. It was Braden. I paused. The door was cracked open just an inch. I knew I should keep walking. I knew eavesdropping was beneath me. But my instincts told me to stop. Please, you have to give me another 30 days, Braden was whispering. His voice was trembling. I barely recognized the arrogant tone he used at the dinner table. I pressed closer to the door. No, do not send the notice to the house, Braden hissed. My wife does not know. If she sees the foreclosure notice, she will leave me. You cannot post it on the door. Foreclosure. The word hung in the air like toxic smoke. I held my breath. Look, I have a lead on some money, Braden continued. My sister-in-law. She is good for it. We are shaking her down tonight. I will have the cash by Monday. Just hold off on the filing, please. I am begging you. I stepped back from the door, my blood running cold. They weren't just behind on a payment. They were in foreclosure. The process had already started. And the lie about the market correction was just a cover. Braden hadn't just lost his job. He had stopped paying the mortgage months ago. And the worst part, he was using me as his collateral. We are shaking her down. That is what he called it, not asking for help, a shakedown. He viewed me as a piggy bank to be smashed open. I did not go to the restroom. I turned around and walked silently back down the hall. I walked past the dining room where my mother was now crying loudly and my father was cursing my name. I walked out the front door into the cold November night. I got into my truck and locked the doors. I sat there for a moment in the silence. They wanted $8,000 to stop the bleeding. But the wound was fatal. A foreclosure notice meant they were tens of thousands of dollars in the hole. My 8 grand would have just been a drop in the ocean, vanished instantly, and they would have come back for more next month. I started the engine. Braden thought he was shaking me down. He thought he was manipulating a naive, jealous sister. He had no idea that he had just handed me the weapon that would end this war. He was hiding the foreclosure from Tasha. He was terrified she would find out. I pulled out of the driveway. I wasn't going to give them the money. I was going to give them something else. I was going to give them reality. But I needed proof. I needed to see the public filings. The courthouse opened at 9 a.m. on Monday. I would be the first one in line. Happy Thanksgiving, family. You wanted to talk about assets and liabilities. We are about to have a masterclass. I stand up from the velvet armchair and walk slowly toward the fireplace. The birch logs are crackling, sending small sparks up into the chimney. I hold my hands out to the warmth, watching the flames dance. It is peaceful here, quiet, secure. Across town, however, the world was ending. I did not need to be there to see it. Small towns talk, and the circle of elite African American families in Atlanta talks even louder. My cousin works as a dispatcher for the county sheriff's office. She texted me at 9:15 in the morning. 2 deputies were dispatched to the Azure Hills estate. The bank was not waiting anymore. Braden had managed to hide the foreclosure notices from Tasha for months. He had intercepted the mail. He had deleted the voicemails. He had probably told her the process servers were just solicitors. But you cannot hide a sheriff's deputy with an eviction order. According to my cousin, Tasha opened the door wearing a silk robe holding a green juice. She probably thought it was a delivery driver. When the deputy handed her the court order and told her she had 24 hours to vacate the premises, she did not scream. She laughed. She actually laughed in the officer's face and told him to check his paperwork because her husband owned the whole block. Then the deputy pointed to the locksmith standing behind him. The reality hit her like a freight train. Braden was nowhere to be found. He had turned off his phone and disappeared, leaving his wife to face the humiliation alone. The neighbors, the ones Tasha had tried so hard to impress with her garden parties and her designer patio furniture, were peeking out from behind their curtains. They saw the golden girl crumbling on her front porch. They saw the movers carrying out her custom Italian sofa and leaving it on the curb because the bank was sealing the property. By noon, my phone began to vibrate. First Tasha, then Braden, then my father, then my mother. The buzzing was rhythmic, frantic, like a heartbeat in panic mode. I did not answer. I let it ring. I poured myself another cup of tea. I walked through my library, running my hand along the leather spines of my books. I needed them to sit in their fear for a moment. I needed them to understand that I was not an emergency service they could dial whenever their vanity project collapsed. Around 2 o'clock, the voicemails started transcribing on my screen. Tasha was hysterical, sobbing so hard her words were unintelligible. My father was angry, demanding I pick up the phone. But it was my mother's message that made me stop. She was not asking for help. She was strategizing. I could picture them perfectly. They were gathered at my parents' house, surrounded by whatever Louis Vuitton luggage Tasha had managed to drag out of the mansion before the locks were changed. My parents' house is nice, but it is a 3-bedroom ranch. It is filled with my mother's porcelain doll collection and my father's oversized recliner chairs. There is no room for Tasha, a missing husband, and their ego. They needed a warehouse for their displaced lives. And unfortunately for them, they thought they knew someone who lived in a warehouse. Me. They still thought my home was a dump. They thought I was living in a construction zone with sawdust on the floor and plastic sheets over the windows. In their minds, my house was a step above a shelter, but it was huge, and more importantly, it was free. I finally picked up the phone when my mother called for the 10th time. Nia. Her voice was sharp, breathless. Where have you been? We have been trying to reach you all morning. It is a catastrophe. Tasha has been defrauded. The bank made a clerical error, a massive mistake, and they have temporarily locked her out of the estate. Braden is meeting with lawyers right now to sue them for millions, but until the courts sort it out, Tasha needs a place to stay. The lie was breathtaking. Even in the face of homelessness, they could not admit the truth. A clerical error, as if the bank accidentally foreclosed on a house that was fully paid for. "I am listening, Mother," I said calmly. "We cannot have her here." Viola continued, her voice lowering to a whisper. "Your father's blood pressure is already through the roof. And frankly, Tasha is in a fragile state. She needs space. She needs privacy to recover from this trauma. So we decided she will stay with you." We decided. Not asked. Decided. "She will need the master bedroom," Viola ordered. "I know you probably sleep in there, but you are used to roughing it. You can move to the attic or sleep on the couch for a few weeks. Tasha needs the ensuite bathroom, she has a lot of skincare products, and she needs a tub to decompress." I looked around my master bedroom. The hand-painted wallpaper from France, the heated marble floors, the clawfoot tub that cost more than Tasha's car. And Nia Viola added, her tone turning venomous. "Please tell me you have done something about the dust. Tasha has sensitive sinuses. I do not want her breathing in mold spores or getting an allergy attack because you are living in a pigsty. Clean up that wreck before she gets there. Hire a maid if you have to, though I doubt you can get one on such short notice. Just bleach everything. We cannot have the baby getting sick because his aunt lives in a ruin. A pigsty. A wreck. A ruin." She was asking me to house them, to shelter them from the storm they created, and she was insulting me in the same breath. She was evicting me from my own bed to make room for the sister who had told me to go to hell just last week. Any normal person would have slammed the phone down. Any normal person would have told them to book a motel. But I was not feeling normal today. I was feeling surgical. If I said no, they would play the victim card forever. They would tell everyone at church that I abandoned my sister in her time of need. They would paint me as the villain who let her family sleep on the street. But if I said yes, they would have to come here. They would have to drive through the iron gates. They would have to walk up the limestone steps. They would have to see what I had built. They thought they were moving into a dump. They thought they were going to do me a favor by bringing their class into my squalor. I smiled at the fire. The trap was not just set, it was baited with their own arrogance. "Okay, Mom," I said, keeping my voice meek. "Send them over. I will tidy up." "Good," Viola huffed. "And Naya, try to have some food ready. Tasha is starving. She hasn't eaten all day. Do not make that weird organic stuff you eat. Just order a pizza, and make sure the driveway is clear. I don't want Tasha to get mud on her shoes when she gets out of the car." I hung up the phone. Mud on her shoes. I looked down at my own shoes. They were silk slippers. I walked over to the security panel on the wall and pressed the button to unlock the main gates. They were coming. Tasha, Viola, and a trunk full of designer clothes that they no longer had a closet for. They were coming to inspect the pigsty. I went to the kitchen. I did not order a pizza. I took out a tray of cucumber sandwiches and a pot of Earl Grey tea. I set the table with my grandmother's silver, the real silver that Viola thought was lost years ago. I lit the candles in the foyer. I adjusted the dimmer switch on the crystal chandelier. Let them come. Let them bring their insults. Let them bring their pity. Because in about an hour, the only thing they would be holding was their own jaw off the floor. The foreclosure was tragic for them. But for me, it was showtime. I looked directly into the camera lens. A small, dangerous smile plays on my lips. You know there is an ancient art to war. Sun Tzu wrote that all warfare is based on deception. He said that when you are strong, you must appear weak. When you are near, you must make the enemy believe you are far away. My family was about to learn that lesson the hard way. They thought they were invading a conquered territory. They thought they were coming to rescue a helpless relation living in squalor. They had no idea they were marching straight into a masterclass in revenge. I picked up my phone to seal the deal. I knew exactly what button to push. My family does not respond to logic, and they certainly do not respond to boundaries. but they respond beautifully to flattery. They cannot resist the opportunity to feel superior. So I typed out a text message to my mother. I kept it simple. I kept it pathetic. I wrote, "Mom, since Tasha is moving in, do you think she could come a bit early for tea? I am really struggling with the living room layout. It is just so dark and old. I really need her expert opinion on how to make it livable before she settles in." I hit send. The response was immediate. It was like dropping a single drop of blood into a tank full of starving sharks. Viola did not even call me back. She just sent a thumbs up emoji followed by a text that said, "Finally, you are making sense. We will be there at 5. Tasha has a lot of ideas." I could practically feel the smugness radiating through the cellular network. In their minds, this was the moment they had been waiting for. Nia, the failure, was finally admitting she was incompetent. Nia, the weirdo, was finally bowing down to Tasha, the trendsetter. Tasha, who had been crying hysterically about being homeless just an hour ago, suddenly made a miraculous recovery. The prospect of criticizing my life was the best antidepressant she could have asked for. Within minutes, my phone blew up with notifications. Tasha added me to a new group chat she named Nia House Rescue. The audacity was breathtaking. She started sending links to cheap, mass-produced furniture sites. She sent a picture of a beige sectional sofa with the caption, "This might cover up those ugly floors you have." She sent a link to a contractor who specializes in drywall, adding, "Maybe we can cover up that creepy brickwork and make it look modern." She was already mentally renovating my home. She was planning to turn my historic Victorian masterpiece into a gray, soulless box filled with signs that say, "Live, laugh, love." But they did not stop there. See, in my family, you do not just trample boundaries, you bring an audience to watch you do it. My mother decided that since we were having a family meeting about living arrangements, we needed the elders present. She invited Aunt Hazel and Uncle Bernard. I let out a low laugh as I read the names in the group chat. Aunt Hazel. The woman is a walking, talking news network. If you sneeze in front of Aunt Hazel at noon, the entire state of Georgia knows you have double pneumonia by sunset. And Uncle Bernard, he is the family enforcer. He is a loud, blustering man who believes that the patriarch's word is law. He was not coming for tea. He was coming to bully me. I knew exactly why they were coming. It was a power move. They wanted witnesses. They wanted to make sure that when they demanded I give up my master bedroom to Tasha, I would be too shamed to say no. They were coming to stage an intervention. The script for this intervention was simple. Nia is trash. Tasha is treasure. Therefore, Nia sleeps on the floor while Tasha takes the throne. I could hear their conversation in my head as they drove over. They were probably pitying me. They were probably telling themselves they were good Christians for helping the poor relation. They were packing air mattresses. I saw the text from Mom pop up. "We are bringing the blow-up beds for you, Nia. Tasha needs the real mattress for her back because of the stress." They were bringing cleaning supplies. Tasha texted, "I am bringing my own bleach. I do not trust whatever eco-friendly dirt you use." They expected to walk into a construction site. They expected sawdust in the air. They expected drafty windows covered in plastic sheeting. They expected me to be wearing overalls looking tired and defeated. They expected to walk in and immediately take charge, pointing out the cracks, wrinkling their noses at the smell, and telling me how lucky I was that they were willing to stay in such a dump. I walked around my house. I looked at the hand-carved mahogany banister I had spent 3 weeks restoring with a toothbrush and linseed oil. It glowed under the warm light of the sconces. I looked at the crystal chandelier I had sourced from a French chateau, hanging like a constellation of diamonds in the foyer. I looked at the original oil paintings I had collected, each one worth more than Uncle Bernard's entire retirement fund. I walked into the kitchen. The countertops were not laminate. They were rare imported soapstone. The appliances were not second-hand. They were professional grade, hidden behind custom cabinetry that matched the 1920s aesthetic. I adjusted the fresh white hydrangeas in the Ming vase on the entry table. I made sure the lighting was dim atmospheric, but bright enough to blind them with the truth. I wasn't just going to show them a house. I was going to show them a mirror. I was going to show them exactly what worthless looked like when it was polished to a high shine. I went to the master bedroom, the room they were planning to steal from me. I smoothed the Egyptian cotton duvet. I fluffed the silk pillows. I lit a candle that smelled of sandalwood and old money. This was my sanctuary. This was the room I had dreamed of when I was sleeping on a futon in a studio apartment, saving every penny while Tasha was buying shoes. They thought they could just walk in and take it. They thought they could bully me out of my own hard-earned comfort. No. The trap was set. The cheese was the tea party. The trigger was their own arrogance. And the snap was going to be deafening. I checked my watch. 5:15. They were late. Of course they were late. Making people wait is a power play. It says my time is more valuable than yours. Then I heard it. The rumble of engines. I walked to the window and peered through the velvet drapes. A convoy of cars was turning off the main road. Tasha's white Porsche, followed by my father's Lincoln, followed by Uncle Bernard's rust bucket sedan. They slowed down as they approached the entrance to my street. They were probably looking for a house number attached to a rotting fence. They were probably looking for the weeds I used to have. Instead, they were staring at a set of 12-foot-high wrought iron gates freshly painted black with gold leaf accents on the spikes. I pressed the button on the wall. The gates began to swing open slowly, silently, powered by a hydraulic system that cost more than Tasha's wedding dress. I watched them drive through. I saw the brake lights of Tasha's car flare red. She was hesitating. She was confused. She was probably checking her GPS, thinking she had made a wrong turn into a billionaire's estate. "Keep driving, Tasha," I whispered to the glass. "You are on the right road. You are just in the wrong tax bracket." I walked to the front door. I smoothed my silk dress. I took a deep breath. I was not the little sister anymore. I was not the daughter who needed approval. I was the lady of the manor. And my guests had arrived. It was time to serve the tea. And with it, a very large slice of humble pie. Imagine, if you will, the camera soaring high above the tree line. It glides over the chaotic, traffic-choked highways of Atlanta, leaving behind the strip malls and the cookie-cutter subdivisions where houses are packed together like sardines. The camera moves north toward the older, quieter part of the city. Here, the streetlights change from harsh sodium orange to a soft gaslight yellow. The pavement turns from asphalt to cobblestone in places. The trees are not saplings planted yesterday. They are massive ancient oaks with branches that arch over the road like the vaulted ceiling of a cathedral. This is the historic district. It is where the city started. It is where the real money lives. Not the loud, flashy money that buys bottle service at the club, but the quiet, terrifying money that builds libraries and names wings of hospitals. Down this tunnel of green and gold leaves, a convoy of vehicles was moving. It looked like a parade of the insecure. Leading the pack was Tasha's white Porsche Cayenne. It was dirty from the week of rain, a smear of mud across the bumper ruining its pristine image. Behind her was my father's Lincoln Navigator, a massive tank of a car that he bought specifically to intimidate people on the road. And bringing up the rear was Uncle Bernard's rusted sedan, puffing a little bit of blue smoke every time he hit the brakes. I was watching them on the high-definition monitor in my kitchen. The security cameras I had installed were military-grade, hidden discreetly in the landscaping. I could see Tasha's face through her windshield. She looked annoyed. She was probably complaining to my mother on the hands-free phone about how far away I lived and how spooky the trees were. They were expecting to pull up to a ruin. They were expecting a yard full of weeds, a porch that was falling down, and a front door that barely closed. Tasha had her bottle of bleach in the passenger seat ready to sanitize my life. The convoy slowed down as they reached the address I had sent them. They did not stop in front of a rotting fence. They stopped in front of a wall. It was a 7-foot-high wall made of hand-laid stone covered in creeping ivy that had been manicured to perfection. And in the center of that wall, stood the gates. These were not the flimsy aluminum gates you buy at a hardware store. These were massive wrought iron masterpieces standing 12 feet tall at their highest point. I had commissioned a local blacksmith to restore them. They were painted a deep glossy black with gold leaf accents on the intricate scrollwork. In the center of the right gate, polished to a mirror finish, was a heavy brass plaque. It caught the last rays of the setting sun. The Legacy Estate, established 1924. I zoomed in on the camera feed. I saw Tasha's brake lights flare bright red. The car came to a sudden, jerky halt. She sat there for a long moment. I could see her head turn. She was looking at the GPS on her dashboard. She was tapping the screen, probably screaming at Siri, telling the machine it had made a mistake. She thought she was at a museum, or a government building, or the home of a senator. She did not move. My father's Lincoln pulled up close behind her, almost tapping her bumper. I saw Desmond roll down his window. He leaned out, looking confused. He waved his hand, gesturing for her to keep going to find the shack that must be behind this estate. But there was nowhere else to go. This was the address. I pressed the button on my console. Slowly, silently, the massive iron gates began to swing inward. There was no screech of rusty hinges. The hydraulic motors hummed with a low, expensive sound. The gates opened like the arms of a giant, welcoming them into the belly of the beast. Tasha hesitated. She let the car idle. She was afraid to cross the threshold. It was instinct. A predator knows when it is walking into a trap, even if its conscious mind is in denial. Finally, she took her foot off the brake. The white Porsche rolled forward, crunching onto the driveway. But it was not a gravel driveway. It was paved with Belgian block gray stones that had been imported and laid in a fan pattern. It was smooth, solid, and stretched for 100 yards, winding through a tunnel of magnolia trees. As the cars moved deeper into the property, the landscaping revealed itself. The weeds were gone. In their place were beds of white azaleas and sculpted boxwoods. The lawn was a carpet of emerald green velvet cut with precision. Landscape lighting flickered on as they drove past, illuminating the trunks of the trees, creating a dramatic, ethereal runway. And then the driveway curved, and the house came into view. I wish I could have frozen time right there. I wish I could have bottled the energy that must have exploded inside those cars. The Blackwood Manor was no longer a gray, rotting ghost. It was a queen on her throne. I had restored the brickwork to its original warm, reddish-brown hue. The mortar lines were crisp and white. The slate roof, which had been full of holes, was now a sleek expanse of dark gray stone that shimmered in the twilight. The copper gutters, brand new and gleaming like pennies, traced the lines of the eaves. The windows, oh, the windows. I had replaced the plywood with custom-made double-paned glass that mimicked the original waviness of antique glazing. But the real showstopper was the stained glass window above the front door. I had installed backlighting behind it. It glowed with vibrant blues, purples, and golds, casting a kaleidoscope of color onto the stone steps below. It did not look like a house. It looked like a university. It looked like history. It looked like money. Real money. The kind of money that doesn't need logos. The convoy came to a stop in the circular courtyard in front of the house. In the center of the circle was a 3-tiered stone fountain. I had turned it on just minutes before. Water cascaded down the tiers with a gentle musical splashing sound, catching the light from the submerged LEDs. Silence. For a full minute, nobody moved. The cars just sat there, engines ticking. Then slowly, the doors opened. Tasha stepped out first. She did not grab her bottle of bleach. It sat forgotten on the seat. She stepped onto the Belgian block pavement, her heels clicking sharply. She looked up, and up, and up. Her mouth hung slightly open. She looked down at her phone again, frantically refreshing her Maps app, desperate for it to tell her she was in the wrong place. She spun around, looking at the fountain, then at the manicured lawn, then back at the house. She looked like a glitching computer program. Viola climbed out of the Lincoln. She was clutching her purse to her chest like a shield. She took off her glasses. She rubbed them on her blouse, squinting at the house as if the clarity of the vision was the problem. She put them back on. The house was still there. She stumbled slightly, grabbing Desmond's arm for support. Desmond did not offer support. He was frozen. He stood by the driver's side door, staring at the copper gutters. He is a man who knows the price of materials. He knows that copper is $6 a pound. He was doing mental math and the numbers were terrifying him. He looked at his own car, then at the house, and he seemed to shrink. The grandeur of the Lincoln Navigator suddenly felt very small, parked next to a mansion that had survived the Great Depression. Uncle Bernard and Aunt Hazel got out of the back. Aunt Hazel, usually the loudest woman in the county, was dead silent. She reached out and touched the stone of the fountain, as if testing to see if it was a hologram. I watched them from the window of the second-floor master suite. They looked like tourists who had gotten lost and wandered onto a private movie set. They were huddled together near the cars, afraid to walk up the steps. They were whispering, pointing. "Is this it?" I could see Tasha mouth the words. "This cannot be it. She lives in a dump. She lives in a shack." Braden was the last to emerge. He walked around the front of Tasha's car. He looked at the roofline. He looked at the pointing on the bricks. He looked at the flashing around the chimney. His face went pale. He knew. He knew exactly what this was. He knew what a historical tax credit looked like. He knew what a restoration grant looked like. And he knew with a sinking feeling in his gut that the equity in this property was probably more than his lifetime earnings. He looked up at the window where I was standing. He couldn't see me behind the sheer curtains, but he stared right at me. I saw fear in his eyes. I turned away from the window. I checked my reflection in the antique mirror. My silk dress flowed like liquid silver. My hair was polished and sleek. I put on my diamond earrings, small, tasteful, real. I walked out of the bedroom, my heels silent on the thick Persian runner rug in the hallway. I walked down the grand staircase, my hand gliding along the mahogany rail. I opened the heavy front door. It swung inward with that heavy, airtight seal that speaks of quality. I stepped out onto the porch. The outdoor chandelier illuminated me. "Hello, family," I said. My voice was calm, projecting easily across the courtyard over the sound of the fountain. They all jumped. Tasha spun around, nearly twisting her ankle. I smiled. A warm, welcoming, absolutely terrifying smile. "You are late," I said. "The tea is getting cold." "And Tasha, did you bring the bleach? I think the fountain might need a little scrub if you have some free time." Tasha just stared at me. She looked at my dress. She looked at the house. She looked at her husband. "Nia." Viola whispered, her voice trembling. "Whose house is this?" I walked down the steps, extending my arms. "Welcome to the Legacy Estate, Mom," I said. "It is mine. Every brick, every stone, every blade of grass." I paused, letting the weight of the words settle on them like a heavy blanket. "Come inside," I added. "You have to take your shoes off, though. The floors are original 1920s white oak, and I would hate for you to track mud on them." I turned and walked back inside, leaving the door open behind me. I did not look back. I knew they would follow. Curiousness and shock are powerful forces. They were like moths drawn to a flame. A very expensive, very beautiful flame that was about to burn their egos to the ground. The camera follows me as I cross the threshold, the heavy oak door clicking shut behind us with a solid, resonant thud that seals out the rest of the world. I do not turn around to see if they are following. I know they are. I can hear their footsteps hesitating on the porch, the shuffling of shoes that are afraid to commit to the surface awaiting them. I step into the grand foyer. This is the moment I have been waiting for. The foyer is the handshake of the home, and my handshake is firm, cold, and dripping with diamonds. I reach out and touch the dimmer switch on the wall. The crystal chandelier overhead flares to life. This is not a lighting fixture. It is a galaxy. It is an authentic French Empire chandelier from the late 19th century, dripping with hundreds of hand-cut crystals. It does not just light the room, it fractures the light into 1,000 rainbows that dance across the walls. I hear a collective gasp behind me. It is the sound of air leaving lungs that have suddenly forgotten how to breathe. Tasha is standing just inside the door. Her eyes are wide, darting around the space like a trapped animal. She is looking for the cracks. She is looking for the dust. She is looking for the peeling wallpaper or the water stains that would validate her worldview. But there are no cracks. Instead, she is standing on Italian Calicotta gold marble. The slabs are massive, seamless, and polished to a mirror finish. The veins of gold and gray running through the white stone look like lightning frozen in ice. Tasha looks down at her feet. She is wearing designer heels, but suddenly they look cheap against this floor. She knows floors. She spent months bragging about the marble in her entryway, which everyone knew was high-end ceramic tile printed to look like stone. This is the real thing. It is cold, hard, and unforgivingly expensive. "Please come in," I say, my voice echoing slightly in the vast space. "Do not be shy. The house likes company." Viola steps forward, her hand trembling as she reaches out to touch the wainscoting. It is hand-carved walnut, dark and rich, smelling of beeswax and history. She runs her fingers along the intricate scrolling. She knows quality. She grew up in a time when things were built to last before she sold her soul for the appearance of wealth. "Nia," she whispers, looking up at the 20-foot ceilings. This is, it is comfortable." I finish for her. "Just a little project I have been working on." I start walking toward the main living area, my heels clicking rhythmically on the marble. I motion for them to follow. "Come, I want to show you the parlor. I think Tasha will appreciate the art. She has such a specific eye." They follow me like sleepwalkers. We pass through a set of double pocket doors into the formal living room. If the foyer was impressive, this room is a silencer. The fireplace is the centerpiece, a massive structure of carved limestone that reaches all the way to the ceiling. A fire is already crackling in the grate, casting a warm golden glow over the silk Persian rugs and the velvet furniture. But I am not interested in the furniture. I am interested in the wall above the fireplace. Hanging there, bathed in the precise beam of a gallery light, is a painting. It is chaotic, vibrant, full of jagged lines and cryptic words. It looks aggressive. It looks raw. I stop in the middle of the room and turn to face them. Tasha is staring at the painting. Her brow is furrowed. She looks confused. Then a flicker of recognition lights up her eyes. "Does that look familiar, Tasha?" I ask softly. She blinks. That looks like that ugly thing you brought to my apartment 3 years ago. The one I told you gave me a headache." "Yes," I say, smiling. "The one you told me to put in the trash because it clashed with your beige aesthetic. You said it looked like a child's finger painting. You actually tried to put it in the recycling bin while I was in the bathroom." Tasha lets out a nervous laugh. "Well, it is ugly, Nia. Why did you frame it? Did you find it in a dumpster? Is this part of your eclectic vibe?" I walk over to the fireplace. I look up at the painting with reverence. "Actually," I say, keeping my voice conversational, "I did not find it in a dumpster. I found it at an estate sale of a retired art professor in Brooklyn. He didn't know what he had. Neither did you." I turn back to her. "This is an early sketch by Jean-Michel Basquiat. It is signed on the back. I had it authenticated by Sotheby's last month." The room goes dead silent. The name hangs in the air. Basquiat. Even people who do not know art know that name. It is a name that sounds like money. Tasha's mouth opens, but no sound comes out. Her eyes bulge. My father, Desmond, steps forward. His face is pale. "Basquiat." He chokes out. "As in the famous artist." "The same, I confirm. I bought it for $50. But after the authentication," I pause for effect. I look at Tasha. I want to make sure she hears this. The current appraisal value is $200,000. Conservative estimate. The silence shatters. 200,000, Tasha squeaks. Her voice is so high it cracks. I nod. At least, it has probably gone up since the last auction results. So thank you, Tasha. If you hadn't thrown it in the trash that day, I might have given it to you. But because you rejected it, I kept it. You literally handed me a fortune because you were too busy looking for something that matched your curtains. Tasha looks at the painting. Then she looks at me. Then she looks at the painting again. Her brain is trying to process the math. $200,000. That is more than the equity she thought she had in her house. That is more than her husband makes in 2 years. And she had held it in her hands. She had thrown it away. She starts to shake. It is a physical reaction. Her hands are trembling at her sides. Her face turns a blotchy shade of red. No, she whispers. You are lying. You are lying just to hurt me. That is a fake. It has to be a fake. You can't have a Basquiat. You drive a truck. I shrug. Assets over liabilities, sis. Some people buy cars, some people buy culture. The reality of it hits her. The house, the gates, the marble, the art. It is not a facade, it is real. And she is the one who is fake. She is the one with the empty bank account and the least life. She looks around the room and suddenly the walls seem to be closing in on her. The beauty of the room is not comforting. It is accusing. Every expensive detail is mocking her bad decisions. I need to use the restroom, she stammers. She looks like she is going to be sick. Of course, I say, pointing to a door on the left. The powder room is right there. Try the heated seat. It is life-changing. Tasha rushes toward the door. She practically throws herself inside and slams it shut. I stand there with my parents. Viola is staring at the painting as if it is a religious icon. Desmond is looking at the floor, probably calculating how much money he has given Tasha over the years versus how much he gave me. 0. Then we hear it. The walls of my house are solid stone, but Tasha is screaming loud enough to penetrate a vault. Mom, Mom. Pick up the phone. I look at Viola. She is standing right next to me. Her phone starts buzzing in her purse. Viola looks confused. She pulls her phone out. It is Tasha calling. She is calling me, Viola says. But I am right here. Answer it, I suggest. She sounds upset. Viola swipes the screen and puts it on speaker. Mom! Tasha's voice shrieks through the phone, echoing in the quiet luxury of the living room. Mom, you have to come in here. You have to see this, Tasha, honey. I am in the living room, Viola says into the phone. What is wrong? Are you okay? No, I am not okay, Tasha screams. The toilet. Mom, the toilet has a remote control. The faucet is gold. Real gold. And the towels. Oh my God, the towels are monogrammed with her initials. Mom, she is rich. She is actually rich. We are the poor ones. We are the poor ones. Mom. I cover my mouth to hide the smile, but it reaches my eyes. Tasha is having a full mental breakdown in my powder room because the thread count of my hand towels is higher than her credit score. She is hysterical. She is sobbing. Mom, get me out of here. I can't breathe. It smells like lavender and money, and I hate it. Viola looks at the phone, then at me. She looks horrified. Not because of Tasha's pain, but because Tasha is saying the quiet part out loud. We are the poor ones. The illusion is shattered. I walk over to the fireplace and adjust the painting slightly, making sure it is perfectly straight. I think she likes the bathroom, I say calmly. My father sinks onto one of the velvet armchairs. He looks defeated. He looks like a man who just realized he bet on the wrong horse for 30 years. I walk back to them. Why don't you go check on her, Mom? I ask. I will go to the kitchen and get the tea. I think we are going to need something stronger than Earl Grey. I turn and walk away, leaving them in the ruins of their own ego. I can still hear Tasha screaming through the phone about the gold faucet. It is the sweetest sound I have ever heard. The tour is not over yet. We haven't even gone upstairs. And wait until they see what is in the closet. But for now, I am going to let them sit with the Basquiat. I want them to look at that $200,000 trash and realize that they threw me away too. And just like that painting, my value only went up when I was out of their hands. The tour of envy has just begun, and the price of admission is their dignity. The camera tilts slightly, creating a sense of unease as the room seems to spin around Tasha, who has just emerged from the powder room. Her mascara is running, leaving black streaks down her cheeks, and her designer dress suddenly looks like a costume she put on to play a part she no longer understands. She looks at her husband, expecting comfort. She expects Braden to rush to her side to hold her, to tell her that my house is tacky and that they are still the golden couple. But Braden is not looking at Tasha. He is looking at me. And the look in his eyes is not familial. It is predatory. He is standing by the grand limestone fireplace, swirling a glass of my most expensive scotch. He looks at the high ceilings, the custom millwork, and the Basquiat painting. He is doing the math again. He is realizing that the ship he is currently captaining, the SS Tasha, is sinking fast, and there is a luxury yacht docked right next to him. Braden takes a step toward me, turning his back on his weeping wife. The angle of the room feels sharp, jagged. The alliance that had tormented me for years is fracturing right before my eyes. You know, Naya, Braden says, his voice smooth and oily. He flashes that salesman smile, but it is tighter now, more desperate. I always told Tasha that you had a hidden talent. I told her Nia is the smart one. Nia plays the long game. Tasha stops crying. She stares at his back. What did you say? She whispers. Braden ignores her. He walks closer to me, entering my personal space. He gestures around the room with his drink. This place, this is not just a renovation. This is a portfolio piece. You have added, what, $3 million in equity here? Conservative estimate. He lowers his voice, trying to create a conspiracy between us. You know the market is tricky right now. But with my connections and your capital, we could really do some damage. I have been saying for years that Tasha holds me back. She does not have the vision, Nia. She just wants to spend. You and I, we speak the same language. I stand perfectly still. I look at Tasha. Her face is crumbling. The man who helped her bully me, the man who laughed when she threw my gift in the trash, is now auditioning to be my business partner. Braden continues, gaining confidence from my silence. I mean, look at this mess with our house. He chuckles, shaking his head as if it is a funny anecdote. I tried to tell her, Nia. I said, Tasha baby, we cannot afford the G-Wagon. We cannot afford the first-class tickets to Cabo. But she just had to have it. She screamed until I handed over the credit card. I am a victim here, really. I have been drowning in her debt for years. You liar, Tasha screams. The sound tears through the room. You told me you got a bonus. You told me we were rich. You leased the car in your name. Braden waves a dismissive hand at her without looking back. She is hysterical, he tells me, rolling his eyes. See what I have to deal with. It is exhausting. Honestly, Nia, I was thinking, maybe I could help you manage this estate. You need a property manager, someone to handle the grounds, the staff. I could probably get out of my lease at the apartment complex and move into the guest wing. I could oversee everything for you. Keep the riffraff out. He winks at me. The audacity is so thick I can taste it. He is offering to leave his wife, my sister, to come work for me as a glorified caretaker just to stay in proximity to wealth. He is a rat. A survivalist rat who will chew through his own family to stay afloat. I look at him with pure, unadulterated disgust. You think Tasha is the problem, Braden? I ask, my voice cool and sharp. He nods eagerly. 100%. She is a liability. You are an asset. I take a sip of my tea. It is funny, I say. Because when I look at the public records, I see your signature on the loan documents. I see your signature on the refinance applications. And I see your signature on the foreclosure notice that was taped to your front door this morning. Braden freezes. The color drains from his face. My father Desmond, who has been watching this exchange with his mouth open, suddenly stands up. He senses the danger. He senses that his perfect son-in-law is about to be executed and he needs to pivot. He needs to regain control of the narrative before the family implodes completely. Desmond claps his hands together loudly. All right. That is enough business talk. He walks over to Tasha and puts a stiff arm around her shoulders. He looks at me, putting on his best patriarch face. He tries to smile, but it looks like a grimace. Nia, look at what you have built here. He spreads his arms wide, encompassing the room. It is magnificent, truly. Your mother and I, we are speechless. We always knew you were capable of great things. He did not know. He told me I would be a failure. But I let him speak. And this house, it is too big for one person. Desmond continues, his voice gaining that familiar, commanding tone. It is lonely. A woman needs family around her. It is not safe for you to be here all alone in this big old place. He looks at Tasha, then at Brayden, and finally back at me. This is actually a blessing in disguise. God works in mysterious ways, Nia. He brought Tasha's house down so that she could come here. It is perfect. He starts pointing around the room, assigning territory. Tasha and Brayden can take the east wing. I saw those rooms upstairs. They are lovely. They can have their privacy. Your mother and I can come on weekends to visit. Tasha can help you decorate the rest of the rooms. You two can finally bond, sisters living together again, just like when you were little. He laughs, a booming, forced sound. It solves everything. You get company. Tasha gets a roof over her head and the family stays together. We can move their things in tomorrow. Brayden, you go grab the bags from the car. Tasha, stop crying, you are moving into a palace. He looks at me, expecting gratitude. He expects me to nod. He expects me to be the good daughter who sacrifices her sanctuary to save the sister who hates her. He thinks that because I have money now, I am suddenly going to buy my way back into their hearts. He thinks I built this house to share it. I set my teacup down on the marble coaster. The click is soft, but in the silence of the room it sounds like a gunshot. No, I say. Desmond blinks. Excuse me, I said no, I repeat. Tasha will not be moving into the east wing. She will not be moving into the guest room. She will not be sleeping on the sofa. The room goes deadly quiet. Tasha looks up, her eyes red and swollen. Brayden looks terrified. But, Desmond stammers, but she is your sister. She is homeless, Nia. The bank took the house. I know, I say. I stand up and walk over to the antique desk in the corner. I open the drawer and pull out a thick manila envelope. I walk back to the center of the room. The camera angle tilts again, looking up at me, making me look tall, imposing, untouchable. I know exactly what happened to the house, I say. I toss the envelope onto the coffee table. It slides across the polished wood and stops right in front of Brayden. Brayden stares at it. He recognizes the logo on the corner. It is from the investment firm that handles distressed mortgage debt for the tri-state area. What is this? Brayden whispers. I cross my arms. You see, when a bank forecloses on a property, they usually auction it off to the highest bidder. But sometimes, if the debt is toxic enough, they sell the note to private investors for pennies on the dollar before it even hits the auction block. I look at Tasha. I have good news, Tasha. Your house isn't going to be sold to a stranger. You don't have to worry about some random developer tearing it down. Tasha wipes her nose. What? What do you mean? I mean that I bought the note, I say. I bought your mortgage debt this morning at 9 a.m. I am the bank now. Desmond's eyes bug out of his head. You own their house? I own the debt, I correct him, which means I own the foreclosure process. And since I am the lender, I get to decide what happens next. Hope flares in Tasha's eyes. It is pathetic to watch. She thinks this is the rescue. She thinks I bought the debt to forgive it. Oh, Nia. She cries out, clasping her hands together. Thank you. Thank you. I knew you loved me. I knew you wouldn't let us lose everything. Oh my God. Brayden, did you hear that? She bought the house for us. We can go back home. She stands up ready to hug me. She thinks everything is going back to normal. She thinks she can go back to her fake life, but this time with a free house provided by the sister she calls a loser. I put up a hand to stop her. Sit down, Tasha. The sharpness of my voice makes her freeze. She slowly sinks back onto the sofa. I didn't buy it to give it back to you, I say. I bought it because it is a decent investment. The land value is okay, even if the house is a teardown. A teardown. Braden chokes, but I continue ignoring him. I am not a monster. I am not going to leave my family on the street. Desmond lets out a breath. Okay, good. Good. So they can stay there. Yes, I say. They can stay there, but not as owners. I look at Braden. You are going to sign the deed over to my LLC in lieu of foreclosure. That saves your credit score from being completely destroyed. And then you are going to sign a lease. A lease, Tasha whispers. Yes. A standard 12-month lease. You will pay rent. To me. Market rate. Which for a house of that size is about $5,000 a month. 5,000, Tasha screams. We don't have $5,000. That is why we stopped paying the mortgage. I look at Braden. Well, then I suggest Braden takes that job he was just offering to do. Braden looks confused. What job? The caretaker job, I say. I need someone to mow the lawn here. I need someone to clean the gutters. I need someone to scrub the fountain. I will pay you $15 an hour. You can use that to pay your rent. Tasha looks at her husband. You applied to be her gardener. Braden turns red. I was just trying to help. I smile. It is a win-win. You get to keep living in your plastic mansion. I get a tenant, and Dad gets his wish the family stays together. I look at Desmond. Isn't that what you wanted, Dad? You wanted me to help. I am helping. I am providing affordable housing and gainful employment. Desmond looks like he is about to have a stroke. He opens his mouth to yell, to demand, to bully me, but he looks around the room. He looks at the marble. He looks at the Basquiat. He looks at the deed on the table. He realizes he has no leverage. None. I have all the money. I have all the property. And now I own his golden child's future. I lean forward. So do we have a deal? Or should I call the sheriff to finish the eviction? Because I have him on speed dial. And unlike you, he answers when I call. Tasha looks at Braden. Braden looks at the floor. We will sign. Braden whispers. Excellent, I say. I clap my hands. Now who wants more tea? I think we have a lot to celebrate. The camera pulls back, twisting slightly, leaving them small and distorted in the frame, while I stand tall, the undisputed queen of the board. The game is over. Checkmate. The camera pulls back slowly. It moves away from the huddled, terrified group of my family and centers on me. I am sitting in the high-backed velvet armchair that looks like a throne. I cross my legs slowly. The silk of my dress rustles in the silence. I pick up my crystal wine glass. The deep red liquid catches the light from the chandelier. I swirl it once. Twice. The sound of the wine moving against the glass is the only noise in the room. My father, Desmond, is staring at the deed on the table as if it is a death warrant. My mother, Viola, is clutching her pearls so hard her knuckles are white. Tasha looks like she has stopped breathing. Braden looks like a man who knows he is about to be sentenced. They are waiting for me to say it is a joke. They are waiting for me to say that because we are family, the debt is forgiven. They are waiting for the Nia they used to know. The Nia who desperate for their approval. The Nia who would set herself on fire just to keep them warm. That Nia is dead. She died the night they laughed at me in the kitchen. I take a sip of wine. I savor the finish. Then I set the glass down. Let us discuss the terms of your surrender, I say softly. Terms. Desmond chokes out the word. Nia, please. We are talking about your sister is home. You said you bought the debt to save it. I did save it, I reply. I saved it from being sold to a stranger who would have evicted them by noon tomorrow. But saving the building is not the same as saving their lifestyle. I pick up the leather-bound folder from the side table. I open it and slide 2 documents across the polished mahogany surface. Here is the situation. I lean forward, locking eyes with Tasha. My LLC, which is ironically named Phoenix Holdings, because I rose from the ashes you tried to burn me in, now owns 100% of the mortgage note on your property. You are in default. You owe 6 months of back payments plus interest plus legal fees. Tasha opens her mouth to speak, but I hold up a finger. I am not finished. Since you cannot pay the arrears, I have the legal right to foreclose immediately. However, I am a benevolent landlord, so I am offering you a choice. I point to the first document. Option 1. You refuse my help. I proceed with the foreclosure. The sheriff returns tomorrow morning to finish what he started. You leave with whatever you can fit in your car. You find a motel. You explain to your country club friends why you are homeless. And you deal with the bankruptcy court on your own. Tasha begins to sob. It is a quiet, broken sound. I point to the second document. Option 2. You sign the deed over to me in lieu of foreclosure. This saves your credit score from complete destruction. You get to stay in the house. Tasha looks up, hope flaring in her teary eyes. Really? We can stay? Yes, I say. But not in the master suite, and not in the guest rooms, and certainly not in the main living areas. I pause. I let the silence stretch until it is uncomfortable. The basement apartment is vacant. The basement, Tasha whispers. Her face goes pale. Yes, I continue calmly, the one that flooded. I have had my contractors pump the water out, but the drywall is still missing, and the floors are bare concrete. It is a studio layout, roughly 600 square feet. It has a kitchenette and a small bathroom with a shower stall. You cannot be serious, Viola shouts. She steps forward, her face red with indignation. You want your sister, a woman of status, to live in a damp basement while the rest of the house sits empty? That is cruel, Nia. That is sadistic. I look at my mother. Status. That word again. It is not cruel, mother. It is market dynamics. That basement is the only part of the house they can afford. And even then I am being generous. I turn back to Tasha. You will sign a standard 12-month lease. The rent is $2,000 a month. That is a family discount. The market rate for that zip code is $2,500. You will pay your own utilities. You will have a separate entrance around the back. You are not allowed in the main house without an invitation. And Tasha, no pets. Tasha looks like she has been slapped. But what about the rest of the house? Who is going to live upstairs? I smile. It is a cold, sharp smile. I am, I say. They all freeze. I have decided to move my office headquarters to the Azure Hills estate. I need a showroom for my clients. Your former living room will make an excellent reception area. Your master bedroom will be my private executive suite. I think I will turn your walk-in closet into a server room. You are going to live in my house. Tasha screams. She stands up shaking. While I live in the basement, it is my house, Tasha. I correct her. And yes, every morning you will hear my footsteps above you. Every time you walk out of your basement door, you will see my car in the driveway. And every time you look up, you will be reminded of who actually owns the roof over your head. Tasha collapses back onto the sofa. She buries her face in her hands. She knows she has no choice. Option 1 is public humiliation and homelessness. Option 2 is private humiliation and a roof. She is trapped. But what about the rent? Braden speaks up. His voice is trembling. We do not have $2,000 a month. I told you I lost my job. Ah, yes. Braden. I turn my gaze to him. I haven't forgotten about you. I slide a third document across the table. It lands right in front of him. You wanted to be the property manager. I say. Well, I have a position open. Braden picks up the paper. His eyes scan the text. His face turns a mixture of red and gray. Security guard. He reads aloud. Groundskeeper and night watchman. I clarify. The estate needs 24-hour security. I have a lot of valuable assets there now. You will patrol the perimeter from 8 p.m. to 6 a.m. You will also be responsible for mowing the lawn, raking the leaves, and scrubbing the driveway. I point to the bottom of the page. The pay is $15 an hour. It will be deducted directly from your rent. If you work enough hours, you might even have enough left over to buy groceries. You want me to wear a uniform. Braden sputters. You want me to stand at the gate and wave at cars. I want you to work, I say sharply. You have been living off credit and lies for 5 years. It is time you learned what manual labor feels like. It builds character. Isn't that what you told me when I was working on my house? You said hard work is good for the soul. Well, Braden, your soul is about to get very healthy. Braden looks at Desmond, pleading for help. Desmond tell her, this is insane. I am a real estate professional. I cannot be a security guard at my own house. Desmond looks at me. He opens his mouth to argue, but then he looks at the opulent room around him. He looks at the Basquiat. He looks at the marble. He looks at the daughter he underestimated. He realizes that I hold all the cards. If he argues, I might kick them all out. Take the job, son, Desmond mutters, looking at the floor. It is a steady paycheck. The room is silent. The defeat is total. Tasha reaches for the pen. Her hand is shaking so badly she can barely hold it. She signs the deed. Then she signs the lease. Braden signs the employment contract. I pick up the papers. I check the signatures. Everything is in order. Excellent. I stand up. The movement is sudden, commanding. They all flinch. You can pick up the keys to the basement unit tomorrow at noon. My assistant will meet you there. Until then, you are trespassing on my property. I walk to the front door and open it. The cold night air rushes in, breaking the warm, scented atmosphere of the house. Please leave, I say. Tasha stands up. She looks small, broken. She walks toward the door, dragging her feet. She stops in front of me. She looks like she wants to say something. Maybe she wants to apologize. Maybe she wants to beg. But she looks into my eyes and sees nothing but a landlord. She lowers her head and walks out into the cold. Braden follows her. He doesn't look at me. He is already thinking about the uniform he will have to wear. My parents are the last to leave. Viola stops at the threshold. She looks back at the warm, glowing living room. She looks at the life she could have been a part of if she had just been kind. Nia, she whispers, we are family. I look at her. I look at the woman who told me to enter through the back door, the woman who told me to hide my truck, the woman who laughed when my sister threw my gift in the mud. I know, Mom, I say. That is why I gave you the family discount. I step back. Good night. I close the heavy oak door. The sound is final. A solid, resounding thud that echoes through the foyer. I lock the deadbolt. Click. Silence returns to the house. But it is not lonely. It is peaceful. It is the sound of victory. The camera pulls back further, moving through the foyer, past the crystal chandelier, past the grand staircase. I am standing in the center of the frame, bathed in golden light. I look small in the vast house, but my shadow stretches long and tall across the marble floor. I turn to face the camera. I lift my wine glass one last time. A small, knowing smile plays on my lips. They told me I was the black sheep. They told me I was a failure. They laughed at my dirt, my dust, and my dreams. But look at them now, living in my basement, guarding my gates. I take a sip of wine. Never let anyone tell you that you cannot build a castle out of the stones they threw at you. Let them talk, let them laugh, and then when the time is right, let them pay rent. I wink at the camera. Cheers. The screen fades to black. The sound of the fountain outside continues to flow steady and strong, washing away the past.